To the Middle East now, and let's go to Gaza, where 4 schools have been hit by Israeli airstrikes over the past 4 days, killing scores of Palestinians, many children. The latest happened in southern Gaza, where doctors at the al-Nasser hospital in Khan Younis say at least 29 people were killed and dozens more were wounded in an Israeli airstrike on a camp for displaced people, which hit tents outside a school. The medics said many of the wounded were in a critical condition. Videos online showed more than a dozen dead and seriously injured people, including children, on the floor of a hospital. Israel says it's looking into the reports. The strike on Khan Younis in the south comes as the Israelis have launched intensive attacks in Gaza City in central Gaza, on the ground and from the air. Many Palestinians have been killed in separate strikes on 2 UN-run schools and 1 church-run school in the Nusrat refugee camp. Meanwhile, talks on the Gaza conflict are due to resume in Qatar. Washington says there's hope for a deal on a truce and hostage release. Well, let's go live to Nick Beek, who's our correspondent in Jerusalem. Nick, I wondered if we could start with the latest on what you're hearing about that incident in Khan Younis.
Yeah, well, eyewitnesses have been talking to the BBC, Nikki, and they've been describing this horrific scene yesterday. This was a site in the south of the Gaza Strip, near the city of Khan Younis, and it was somewhere where a lot of displaced Palestinian families had been seeking shelter and safety. There was apparently food and water there. Some of the children were able to have lessons. But this missile struck yesterday without any warning, and eyewitnesses have described a graphic, horrific aftermath, including women and children having been killed. Some medical officials are saying that at least 29 people were killed. As for the Israeli response to this, they say they're looking into claims that civilians were killed. The Israelis are saying, though, that they carried out this attack, but they were targeting an individual who they said was a Hamas operative, who they say was involved in the October the 7th attacks, and that was the justification for striking there. As you were saying, this is the 4th attack on a school that was being used to shelter people in the past 4 days, and in the first 3 cases the Israeli authorities said that they were targeting Hamas politicians or Hamas police officers or Hamas fighters in these locations, so that's why they were aiming for them.
The Israeli attacks also happening around Gaza City.
Yeah, that's right, and we've seen quite an increase in activity around that place. Of course, thousands of people, Palestinians, having to move because of the fighting raging there. Hamas said that they've been engaging with Israeli fighters, Israeli troops, claiming to have killed some of them. At the same time, the Hamas leadership are saying that the ongoing Israeli operations are putting in danger and threatening the peace talks that you mentioned that are once again taking place in Qatar today. And there is some optimism that's sort of built up over the past 10 days or so that the two sides may be reaching an agreement, but obviously what happened yesterday doesn't help at all. And you've got the Prime Minister here, Benjamin Netanyahu, vowing to keep up the fighting to destroy Hamas, even though opposition figures, and also we're seeing some senior members of the military here apparently believing that the idea of completely destroying Hamas just isn't possible to do.
And Nick, on these ceasefire talks, you talk about optimism. Some of this seems to be around that demand that reports say Hamas have dropped about there being the permanent ceasefire.
Yeah, this is absolutely the crux of it. So what they're looking at the moment, what they're discussing, is a proposal that was put forward by President Biden back in May, and it would involve initially a 6-week truce, a pause in the fighting, during which time more hostages taken by Hamas on October the 7th could be released and returned to their families. It seems in the past week that Hamas has dropped this key demand, and they were saying that if there is going to be this process, right at the start, the Israelis have to say this will be an absolute complete ceasefire, and that the troops will go, the tanks will go, and there won't be a resumption of Israeli operations. Now, if that is the case, if Hamas has said that's something they'll accept, then potentially that does mean that they are moving in the same direction. But as we've been hearing publicly, the proclamations from both sides suggest there is big tensions. I think interesting to listen to the White House. They've been saying that despite all that's being bandied about behind closed doors, and remember this is a private negotiation, the two sides are moving closer together. They're not hugely optimistic, though, the White House. They're not talking about any sort of imminent breakthrough, and if there is to be one, there certainly aren't any signs of that coming at the moment, Nikki.
Nick Beake, thank you very much. Latest there from Jerusalem.